Okay, this is English 250, Week 6, Part 1. We continue with Baudrillard, and I am in the park. One of my favorite, well, it's not my favorite Shakespeare play, but an important Shakespeare play is called As You Like It. And one of the jokes is that it's about a bunch of city people, and they move into the woods, and the idea is the city is corrupt and terrible, and the woods are lovely and beautiful, and we'll talk more about that idea in this class. But one of the jokes is that one of the young men from the city loves one of the young women from the city, and they're both in the country. And he hangs his poems up on trees because he loves her so much. He doesn't expect anybody to see them. He's just expressing his feelings and then people harass him like the whole point of being in the woods is just get away from civilization. If you're turning the trees into books by putting words on them, carving into them or hanging your poetry on them, that they're making fun of him because he's a ridiculous city dweller who feels like nature needs to be improved by having city things like pieces of paper with writing on them hung up on trees. And then here I am now, and I have officially hung our reading on a tree. I don't know where that birdhouse came from, but it makes me happy. So our reading is now, or the Baudrillard is hanging on a tree in Prospect Park because this is what online education has brought to us. So welcome back. We're continuing on with Baudrillard. So Baudrillard's main point here is that this is part of the art and reality unit. It's called the art and reality unit because each author is trying to think of the relationship between art and reality. So Plato thought art was a bad copy of reality, and that it distracted us, and that reality was bad to start with, and that art would get us further away from what we should be studying, which is philosophy and the truth with a capital T and higher heavenly things. And that art, Plato thought we shouldn't be paying attention to reality. So paying attention to a copy of reality is even worse. What we should be doing is paying attention to higher heavenly things, like the truth with a capital T, the nature of justice, the power of love, or these big things. And Sidney said, no, that's crazy. That's not the relationship between art and reality. Poetry is a totally separate thing. It's fiction. Fiction isn't lies. Lies is when you say something about reality that's not true. But poetry's not saying anything about reality. It's doing its own thing. Pope thought that art was a copy of reality, and he thought that was a good thing. God made reality, so if you copy reality, you're doing what God did, and that's probably following in his footsteps, and that's good. And then we got to Oscar Wilde, and Oscar Wilde said that he agrees with Plato that art tells lies about reality, but he thinks that's a good thing because he thinks reality sucks. And so if you get something that's different from reality, art doing its own separate thing, that would be a good thing, and we would need more of that. And with that, we come to Baudrillard. All the philosophers we've looked at so far, Plato and Sidney and Pope and Oscar Wilde, have all talked about the relationship between art and reality, but all of them have assumed that it's pretty easy to tell the difference, right? They think when you say what is the relationship between art and reality, you're assuming you can tell, right? You know the difference, and then you say, okay, well, what is the relationship? Well, art's like this and reality's like that. But what if you couldn't tell the difference between art and reality? And again, we're using nature, the word nature, to mean reality. And we're using art in a bigger way, too. Art is being used to mean man-made things. You might think about the relationship between art and reality as sort of things that God made versus things that God made is nature, and things that man made are art. And so we've been talking about plays and poems and novels and sculpture and video games and comic books and that kind of thing. Baudrillard wants to push this into some stranger territory where we're talking about clones. And he's still talking about, because for him, if art is a copy of reality, then a clone is sort of like art because it's a copy of reality. A map is sort of like art because it's a copy of reality. So he's talking about some slightly different things that you don't normally think about clones and maps and mirrors as being art or about art. But they are they're similar. If you remember that one of the definitions of art that's been extremely famous is Plato and Pope saying that art is a copy of reality. And when you realize that, you start to expand into other things that copy reality, and that's how you get to mirrors and clones and maps. Okay. I know it's a weird leap. It's a very strange use of the word art. We're using words in some strange ways because the definitions are getting bigger because we're doing big philosophy. And I mentioned last time that the word abstract means to kind of simplify. Well, if you abstract art and you decide that it means copy of reality, then you're going to want to include mirrors you're going to want to include mirrors and ghost doubles and clones, because all those things are copies, and maps, because they're all copies of reality in some form or another. Okay, cool. One of my favorite authors, actually Borges, who's already mentioned in the first pair, he's a short story writer from Argentina, has a sentence I think about all the time. He says, mirrors and copulation are abominable because they multiply the number of mankind. Which is a kind of a complicated way to say that, but what he means, in other words, what he means is that mirrors and sex are bad. Why? Because they multiply people, and people suck. I don't know. That quote always entertains me. Okay, so let's return to going through Baudrillard. Baudrillard's tough. Reading Baudrillard's like reading very complicated poetry. It's not meant for you to understand it in one go. If you've done this thing where you've decided to try to read ahead, it can be a little bit confusing, especially with Baudrillard and Derrida, who are goddamn impossible to read. They are exhausting and very, very difficult, but we can handle it. The trick is you just go slow, you stop every couple of sentences, and you start thinking of examples. Philosophers tend not to give a lot of examples. They'll give some examples, but most philosophers prefer to just, it's the same thing in math class, right? Your math teacher doesn't use any examples. He'll just be like, 2 + 2 = 4. And then you're like, 2 what? 4 what? What are we talking about? Chickens or volcanoes? Or what are we, insane people? What are we counting? But the point is math is supposed to work everywhere on everything. And philosophy, like math, is supposed to work everywhere on everything. And so sometimes these guys don't give the best examples, or when they do give examples, they're examples that made more sense hundreds of years ago. So the philosophy might, or decades ago in this case. So the philosophy might be, it's difficult. But the thing that's really going to help you think about it is putting things in your own words and providing examples. This is, by the way, my entire English 101 class is based off of this principle. So put things in your own words, paraphrase as you may. See, the shit from 101, you still need it. It's still useful. Okay. All right, so let's go back into this piece of Baudrillard that I've hung on a fucking tree like a maniac. Still getting mosquitoes. Okay. So we were over here. We ended on the desert of the real. So let's keep going. In fact, even inverted, the fable is useless. He's talking about this idea that the fable is the thing from the first paragraph about it's a fable, which is like a simple story that has a sort of metaphorical meaning. That the fable is about a country that tried to turn the map, that tried to make a perfect map of the world, and the map replaced the world. He says, in fact, even inverted, the fable is useless. Perhaps only the allegory of the empire remains. For it is with the same imperialism that present-day simulators try to make all the real, coincide with their simulation models. So, right, this is about how once you make all the real, coincide with their simulation models. So, like, you make a map, and then the world doesn't fit the map, so you change the world to match the map. That's crazy. The map's supposed to be a copy of the world. But what happens when you feel like you make a map, and then the world doesn't fit the map? Do you change the world to fit the map? That's crazy. But we do that all the time with people. You may have an idea of what, you may have an idea, women are like this, and black people are like that. This is how you get racism with stereotypes and whatnot. And you may get this kind of stuff. But what happens, because where'd you get the stereotypes from? Well, a lot of them you got from art and literature, things you saw in the movies. Well, what are you doing to people to make them fit into those roles, even though they don't? I'm sure, like, for example, if people think like young black men are thieves, you may have had an experience of having been in a store where people look at you like you're going to steal something. Why? Because they're trying to make reality match the map, right? Where'd they get the map from? Art. Isn't art supposed to be a copy of reality? If you learn something from art and you're trying to make reality match it, haven't you fucked something up? This is Baudrillard's concern, is that these two realms aren't separate. All right, let's go through here. All right. He said, it's no longer a question of either maps or territory. Something has disappeared. The sovereign's difference between them that was the abstraction's charm. The whole point, when someone does a drawing of you and it looks just like you, that's charming. Where's that charm come from? Well, because there's you and there's a copy of you. And it's cool to notice those two things and be like, oh, that's neat, it looks just like it. But if you can't tell the difference, think about how nice it would be if somebody showed you a picture of you, like a drawing, and it looked just like you. You think that was charming. Now think about what would happen if somebody walked up to you and instead of having a drawing of you with them, they had a clone of you with them, wearing the exact same outfit. You would lose your fucking mind. That would not be charming. That would be hella disturbing. So this is what Baudrillard is concerned about. What happens when our ability to make art becomes so realistic that it begins to replace reality and disturb things. All right. It is no longer a question of maps or territory. Something has disappeared. The sovereign difference between them that was the abstraction's charm, right? If you can't tell the difference between art and reality, it's no longer charming, it's disturbing, it's scary. For it is the difference between art and reality which forms the poetry of the map and the charm of the territory, the magic of the concept and the charm of the real, right? This is like the concept and the real, the map and the territory, right? This is the art and nature. He says, this representational imaginary, please notice that the word representational here, like to represent something, right? That if you get a drawing and it represents you, it's a copy of you. So representational means also like a copy. If you represent something, you're copying it. This representational imaginary, both of which culminate in and is engulfed by the cartographer's mad project of an ideal coextensivity between the map and the territory. He's talking about a map maker being so crazy that he wants an ideal coextensivity between the map and the territory, meaning somebody's so crazy they want the map not just to look like the territory, but to be indistinguishable from the territory. Because territory is the real world and the map is the copy of the real world. It disappears with the simulation, whose operation, oh boy, Jesus Christ, I hate teaching this. Oh, and I went way over. All right, I'll pick, oh shit, I forgot, I got on a rant. Oh shit. All right, I'll pick this up in the next video. Sorry, this went 11 minutes and not 9. Bye!